All right, welcome everyone to our March HR Service Delivery Academy session on the topic of listening posts. We're excited to have everyone tuned in live with us today. And what I wanted to do is, just because this is our second HR Service Delivery Academy session to date, is talk a little bit about what to expect today. And if you were on with us last month, or if you watched the recording, this might be a bit of a recap for you, but what I wanted to talk about first is the fact that these sessions are for you. So if you are a customer or a partner or another community user or stakeholder, we really want to make sure that these sessions are helpful for you and that they are enabling you to better adopt and use our product. So please interact with us. Use the Q&A to ask questions and the chat to let us know what is on your mind. We'd love to hear from you. Second, I wanted to point out that these sessions are not just a presentation. So we will be using PowerPoint slides to get the session kicked off and to share some grounding information, but we also will be going into the product live and configuring and going through some hands-on demo. So I'm excited for that part of the session. And the other thing that I wanted to call out is that we will be back next month. So our HR Service Delivery Academy sessions are scheduled to happen on the fourth Wednesday of the month. And so we will be back here in April, on April 28th, and we have officially selected our topic for next month. It will be HR Agent Workspace. So that'll be a really big and exciting topic, and I'm excited to have that on the docket for April. So it was kind of announced here first and will be posted up on community soon. So you can go ahead and make sure that you get that added to your calendar if you're not already registered for our Academy session series. Now, before we get too far, I just wanted to introduce the names that you probably see on this webinar. So first, we have Lisa from our product marketing and community team. She is our host of this call. She is the one who kicked off the webinar at the start of the hour and is enabling us to go actually live on YouTube right now. I am Allison, and I am going to be the primary speaker and presenter for today. And I am also joined by Padmaja and Lena, also from our product team. Padmaja and Lena are both product experts, and so they will be helping with the Q&A throughout today. So if you type a question into the Zoom chat and you see an answer, it's very likely that that answer is either coming from Padmaja or Lena. Now let's talk about what we'll actually cover today, so the agenda. So first, we're going to start with an overview of listening posts. So we'll talk about the why behind listening posts, the use cases, and then we're going to jump into that live configuration walkthrough and demo portion that I mentioned, where we'll be hands-on in the product. And then we do have time carved out at the end for questions and answers. So with that, we can get started with the overview of listening posts. And what I wanted to do first here is start with a couple of quick facts that I knew would come up at the beginning of the call around availability, compatibility, and licensing. So listening posts were first introduced in January of this year on our ServiceNow Store, so 2021. And listening posts are compatible with our Orlando family release and beyond. So the exciting thing about this is it doesn't mean that you have to be on Quebec to use listening posts, and it doesn't mean you even have to be on Paris. You can be on Orlando and above. And we also wanted to call out the licensing requirement for listening posts. So this is included in the HR Service Delivery Enterprise package. So again, these are always common questions, so wanted to cover those at the very beginning of the call. Now I want to talk a little bit more about what the ServiceNow Store is and how you actually get listening posts, since this is something that's newer, especially for our employee workflows products. So if you look at kind of the center of this slide, you'll see that timeline visual where you see that we released Orlando in Q1 of 2020, Paris in Q3 of 2020 as well, and then Quebec just very recently came out in this quarter, just about a week ago. And then under Safe Harbor, of course, Rome is our next planned release for Q3 of 2021. So all of you are probably pretty familiar with this general cadence of about 2 releases per year, once in Q1 and once in Q3. Now, in addition to that, what ServiceNow Store allows us to do is actually push out innovations and applications to our customers outside of those large family releases. So this is very exciting for us because we get to innovate faster and get things into the hands of our customers even quicker. So you don't always have to be dependent on the latest family release to take advantage of a new application. The other thing I wanted to point out, if you've never been out to the ServiceNow store, I have the URL over on the right of the slide. So it's just store.servicenow.com. And this is the screenshot on the right of what you would actually see if you were to search listening posts out on the store. So this is the landing post for listening posts, and you can see the button over on the right of how to actually get the application. All right. Now we'll talk about the purpose behind listening posts, or why listening posts. So if you take a step back and think about all of the different enterprise workflows and experiences that are happening within ServiceNow today, you'll realize that there is a huge opportunity for us to be kind of getting feedback within those moments. Because again, there's a lot that's going on in ServiceNow, a lot of workflows and experiences that are built natively in our platform. So what we're able to do with listening posts specifically is capture in-moment feedback immediately within those micro moments from employees. And then we take that and we identify strengths and weaknesses of maybe an experience, a program, or a service. And that can be then used to drive insights and encourage stakeholders to take action and act on improvement opportunities. And to continue to kind of reinforce or express the why behind listening posts, we have kind of this before and after visual. So before listening posts, or maybe even today, many of you within your organizations are probably triggering things like, satisfaction surveys at the close of a case. And those are great. They serve their purpose, and you are getting feedback on that kind of end-to-end experience and the service that was provided during that process. But with listening posts, of course, again, we're able to capture that quick feedback immediately within those smaller micro moments. So when you think about all of the different types of experiences that an employee could have, some of those could be quite long. And so it's very valuable to, again, zoom into those micro moments and get that quick feedback throughout the process. And the reason that this is very important is, the fact that when you're catching an employee directly within that moment, you're very likely to get feedback that is real because they are directly going through that process and things are fresh in their mind. Okay, now to continue to bring this to life, we have a couple of example use cases that we wanted to talk through. So I won't read through everything that's on the slide here, but you can just see a couple of examples. So one of those is maybe checking in and doing a pulse survey during the benefits enrollment process, maybe during an end-to-end parental leave journey. Maybe you have just rolled out a new tool and you would like to gauge kind of the ease of use and the experience of your employees as it relates to that tool. So the key message here is that there are actually a lot of use cases for listening posts. And the thing to understand is that the commonality across all of these is the fact that these are moments or workflows that are happening, and there is the need to, again, get that in-moment feedback so you can drive those continual process improvements. So now what I want to do, I just want to take a quick pause. We're going to now go through some of the key features that are included in the listening post application via slide format. But I want to just check in with Padmaja and Lena to see if we have gotten any questions that we should take time to answer live so far.
No questions at this time, Allison.
Great. Okay. Sounds good. We will carry forward. So like I just mentioned, we're going to give kind of an overview of some of the features in slide format, and then after that, we will go into an instance. So first up on the list is pulse surveys and pulse themes. So a pulse survey is what you actually create to get that in-moment feedback from employees. And a pulse theme is actually how you can group surveys together. And so when you would want to kind of create a pulse theme is if you have surveys that have a common purpose or a common theme. And so each pulse theme can have one of two types. It can either be a group pulse or an employee lifecycle pulse. And really, you would want to select group pulse when you know the audience and the start date and the end date for your theme or your pulse survey. And then you would want to choose employee lifecycle if you would actually like to embed that survey into an end-to-end employee lifecycle event. So we'll actually walk through an example of each of these to bring this to life a little bit more, but wanted to introduce that concept here. Now to recap a little bit, how do you actually deliver pulse surveys? So this gets to what we were just talking about a little bit on the last slide, but you can deliver a pulse survey to an audience from listening posts directly. You can also deliver a pulse survey as an activity type in a lifecycle event. And ultimately, you can also deliver pulse survey via content delivery or content automation. And just to call something out, content automation is the same thing as a campaign if you're familiar with that functionality. So just wanted to call out those two differences and how we maybe word that feature. Okay, next I wanted to point out that we do have a notification that triggers if a user is targeted for a pulse survey. So this is just a screenshot preview of what this looks like. And once we transition to the live configuration and demo portion, we'll actually pull this up in the instance and look at it then. Next, I wanted to share that with listening posts, we actually have 3 new Employee Service Center widgets. So if you look at the left, we have the listening posts My Survey widget. So this is typically placed on the Employee Service Center homepage and actually allows employees to directly view their pulse survey questions one at a time and complete those pulse surveys. In the middle, we have the listening post survey list widget. So this, if you are a user who has multiple pulse surveys assigned to you, you can actually look at this to view a full list of everything that you have outstanding. And then on the right, we have the listening post take survey widget. So this is slightly different than the first widget that we talked about on the left, and the fact that you can actually view all of the questions that are part of that pulse survey at once and submit your results. So as we dig in today and go into the instance, we'll actually look at all of these widgets live, and I'll click through and show you exactly what these experiences look like. But again, wanted to call out the fact that we do have these 3 new widgets. Next, we have the Pulse dashboard. So this is a very powerful aspect of the listening post application because this is actually what allows your stakeholders to glean insights from those pulse surveys that are being sent out. And the really great thing about this dashboard is that it's drillable. So you can do a lot of different filtering and slice and dicing of the data. So once we get into, again, the demo portion, towards the end, I will actually pull up the dashboard and we have some sample data populated that we can click around with. Next, we have something that is called a response sharing rule. So thinking back to the dashboard that we just talked about, it's very likely that you would have very specific stakeholders that you would like to share those responses received back with. So what a response sharing rule helps you do is create a rule to specifically share data within those pulse teams for different stakeholders. So again, this is something that we will configure live. We have an example use case so we can walk through the exact steps and what each of these fields means. So now we will move to the actual live configuration and demo. So I'll switch over to my environment in a moment, and I will take another quick pause to just check in to see if we have any Q&A questions that we should talk about live right now.
No questions as of yet.
All right, sounds good. So I will stop sharing my slides and pull up my instance. All right, so now that I have that up, I will reshare my screen. All right, so let me log back in really quick. And what I'm going to do for this portion is I'm going to actually impersonate an employee. I'm going to impersonate Alva here. And we are going to go back out to the Employee Service Center. And Alva has a pulse survey that she has been targeted for. So we're going to look at what this looks like from her perception. And what I would say before I dig in here is that this,
I think, yep. I was going to say, we just answered the question. And then we also had some on Q&A. So I apologize. The question was answered. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks, Lisa. So what I was saying here is that I am in an out-of-the-box instance. So what I've done to prepare for this kind of live configuration and demo portion is I have just installed a couple of applicable plugins. So I've gotten, the listening post functionality and some of our other core capabilities in this instance. I have also placed this listening posts my surveys widget here on my Employee Service Center homepage. And then the only other thing that I've done here is I've created a couple of example pulse surveys just so we have some data and some information to look at. So essentially what you'll see here is what you will get with your out-of-the-box instance. So again, like I said, I am impersonating an employee, Alva. So she has this pulse survey that has been assigned to her around collaborating with her team. So within this listening post my surveys widget, Alva can see the fact that there are 2 questions as a part of this pulse survey. She can see the question itself. So we're asking her how effectively her team is collaborating remotely. And the really nice thing is that she can also complete this question directly within this widget. So Alva can give this a star rating. I'm going to go ahead and give it a 4. And we can also see that Alva is able to leave a comment if she desires. And once we flip perspectives and we go into the actual configuration of this, I will show you exactly how you create a pulse survey question and allow a user to add a comment if that's something that your organization is interested in. So I'm going to go ahead and submit question 1 of 2. And now you can see that Alva is presented with the second question of the pulse survey. So how would you rate your overall experience? And for this, she's also going to give that a 4. So once Alva clicks submit, we'll see this confirmation message to let her know that she's all up to date and she has completed that pulse survey that was assigned to her. Now, you'll also notice that widget is actually removed from her visibility because she just had that one pulse survey that was assigned. If she actually had multiple, the next survey would load. And what we'll do is we're going to go flip perspectives here in a moment, and I'm going to configure 2 different pulse surveys for Alva again, and then I'll show you what it looks like if she actually has 2 to complete. And we'll also look at some of those other experiences where we can dig into the list view of the pulse surveys. So what I'm going to do, like I said, is go to kind of a different persona. I am going to stop impersonating Alva. I am going to end my impersonation, and I am actually just going to stay logged in as the system administrator. And one comment about that. So a lot of the things that I will be showing can be done by users with other roles like the listening post admin, listening post creator and manager, but I'm going to just stay logged in as system admin because there are a couple of things that I want to show. I'm going to be looking at our email logs to show the notifications that are triggered, and I am going to need to execute a scheduled job. So just wanted to provide a little bit of context as to why I'm in as system admin. So now the first thing that I want to do is I'm going to search listening posts in the left filter navigator. And you can see, of course, the listening posts module here. Beneath that, we of course have several items. And what I'm going to do naturally throughout the rest of the session is talk about each of these and configure each of these. But what I want to do right now is just provide a summary of what each of these items really is or what they mean. So we'll start with pulse themes. We talked about that a little bit earlier when we were in the slides, but really again, what a pulse theme is it allows you to group pulse surveys together that have a similar purpose or theme. And again, pulse themes can have one of 2 types, group pulse or employee lifecycle. So we'll look at that in a moment, and we'll actually configure 2 of those pulse surveys under each of those themes. Then we have pulse surveys themselves. So again, this is where you actually create the pulse surveys and you can define the questions that you would like to be included for your pulse survey. Then we have pulse users. So this is a list view of the different users who have been assigned a pulse survey in list format. So you can see things such as the state of the survey, so whether or not they've completed it. Then we have what is called a pulse question bank. So the use case here is, let's say that you actually have a question that you would like to use across multiple pulse surveys. You would want to go ahead and add that to your question bank so you can very easily pull that up and use it in another pulse survey. Next, we have audience. So this is something that some of you might be familiar with if you have used other aspects of our product and surfaces in other areas. So one example of that might actually be with content delivery or campaigns or content automation. So if you've ever used that, you've probably run into an audience. And so what that is, just for anyone who hasn't used an audience before, is it is a way for you to essentially define a group of users that you would like to target for something. So within listening posts, that specifically comes into play when we are creating our pulse surveys. So once we actually start configuring, I'll show exactly where you would select that. Then we have user criteria. So this specifically comes into play in the context of listening posts when we are creating one of those response sharing rules. So again, that was the use case where we want to share different responses that we're getting with stakeholders, and we need to create a rule around that. User criteria comes into play because you can actually select a specific user or a group of users to share that Pulse theme data out with. And again, we'll configure an example version of that to bring that to life a little bit. And then last over here on the filter navigator, we do have the Pulse dashboard. So we talked about this a couple of minutes ago when we were in the slides, and we will also dig into that and click around in that dashboard soon, but just wanted to call that out that that was available over here in the navigation. So now what I'm going to do is I am going to click into Pulse themes directly. And here is a list view of all of the different Pulse themes that I have created in advance of our session. So I've created a lot of examples here. You can see things like employee wellness, health benefits, new hire onboarding, parental leave. What I'm going to do for our time together is I'm actually going to create a new Pulse theme from scratch. So I'm going to click this new button here. And we are going to create a Pulse theme around goal setting. And for this example, we are going to keep this selected as a group pulse. But again, this is where you can see the fact that we do have the ability to select two different types for our theme. So again, group pulse or employee lifecycle. And I am selecting group pulse because I know that audience in advance and the start date and end date of that are pretty static. And we'll again come back and show an employee lifecycle example as well. But for now, we're going to keep that as group pulse. So now what I'm going to do is I am going to save this form. And once I save this Pulse theme form, you'll notice that I actually have two new related lists that appear here. So we see the ability to create a response sharing rule from within this theme, which we will come back to in a little bit. And then I also see the ability to actually create a Pulse survey directly. Something to point out is, of course, you can still get to Pulse surveys like we mentioned over here on the left navigation, but you can also click in to create a new Pulse survey here within this related list. And the benefit of clicking here within this related list is that when you do that, your theme will be populated automatically from whatever theme you were on previously. So now that we have clicked new, we are prompted to enter a name for our Pulse survey. So our overall theme is around goal setting. So this specific survey, let's say, is around goals resources. Now we also see this add audience field. So if I check this box here, what's given to me is the ability to actually select an audience that is a part of my instance. So if I click in here, I can go ahead and select an audience. And I have the list that's available here to me because I have created these audiences as demo data. And you very likely will have audiences that you've already created if you are already a customer, especially if you are already using other elements, like I mentioned before, perhaps maybe even content delivery or content automation. What I'm going to do for today is I am going to specifically select our US users audience that's already been configured. And the next field that we see here is the ability to send notifications. So you can actually determine if you would like to send notifications to alert your audience that they have been assigned a new Pulse survey. So I'm going to go ahead and keep this selected. You can, of course, uncheck that if you don't want those notifications to be sent. But I would like to show you all the notifications, so I'm going to keep that selected. Then, of course, we can see the fact that this record is active. The state is still in draft because we are still drafting this Pulse survey. And then I'm prompted to actually enter a start date and an end date for my pulse survey. So for this example, I am going to go ahead and start our pulse survey for today. And I am going to decide to run this pulse survey for 1 week. So I'm going to select a week from today. Now that I've done that, I am going to go ahead and save this form. And now you'll notice again that now that I've saved this pulse survey form, I have two related lists again that have populated. So one, we see the survey recipients list. And what I can do here, this is actually an alternative to that audience field to identify recipients for the survey. But since we've already selected an audience, we are all good here, and I'm going to keep that as our US users. And then we can actually go into the questions related list and decide what questions we want as a part of this pulse survey. So you'll see here that we actually have two options. So the first option is we can actually select a question from our question bank. So if you remember earlier when I spoke about this, the concept of a question bank is essentially a bank of questions that are reusable across multiple surveys. So I'm going to go ahead and click into this button to access our question bank. And you can see here that we do have one question that's already available in the bank. So it's a question around overall experience. And just to show what this looks like, I will go ahead and select this question from the bank and add it to my pulse survey. So I've added a question from the question bank, and now I'll show you what it looks like to actually create a new question. So for our new question, I am going to ask a question around kind of the resources that were provided to employees around goals, since that relates back to our theme that we have selected. So let's say, how would you rate resources provided to you around goals? I'm also prompted to select a name for this, and I will name this as Goals Resources. Then you'll see that we are prompted to select a rating option. So we, by default, out of the box, have the option to select either a star rating or a number rating. I am going to keep this selected as star. Then we have the ability to add a description. I'm going to go ahead and leave that blank for today. Then we have the ability to specify an order. So the use case here is, let's say you have multiple questions and you would like to decide what order those questions should appear in. That is how you would use this field. I'm going to go ahead and leave that at the default, but just wanted to call out the purpose of that. Then we have this allow additional information field. So if I go ahead and check that, this is actually what's enabling employees to add a comment in addition to their response to the question. So earlier when we were impersonating Alva, the employee, we saw that she did have the ability to leave a comment for the pulse survey that was targeted to her. And so this is actually how that was configured. This box was selected, and you'll see here that once you select this box, an additional field appears here. So additional information label. The default label is leave a comment, but the great thing about this is that you can actually decide what makes sense for your specific pulse survey question here. So just to show an example, I will say, please add any additional comments. Then we can also see a couple of other fields. So this record is of course active, and then we have the ability to decide if this question should be mandatory. So that is selected by default. You can of course unselect that. I am going to keep that selected for today. So now that I've filled out all of those fields for my pulse survey question that I am creating from scratch, I'm going to go ahead and click submit. All right, so now that we have our pulse survey name, our theme, I've selected an audience, I've decided to keep notifications on, I've selected my start date, my end date, and I have populated questions as a part of this pulse survey. What I'm going to do next is actually go ahead and publish this pulse survey. So I'm going to click publish. And now what we would do next is we would actually have a scheduled job that would run in the background to actually start adding Pulse users to receive this survey. So I'm going to go ahead and click into our scheduled jobs list. And I am going to look for the applicable scheduled job by typing in Pulse. So the one that we're looking for right now is this listening post create group pulse instance scheduled job. That's the one that applies right now. You'll also see we have another scheduled job that runs if you are triggering this as part of content automation or campaigns, but this is the relevant one for right now. So I am going to go ahead and click into this. And one thing that I'll call out, you'll see that this scheduled job in this instance is set to run on a daily basis, but I'm going to go ahead and execute this manually right now, just for the purposes of our session. So now what I'm going to do is go back to the pulse survey that we just created. And now what I would expect to see is start to see the pulse users start to populate here. So I'm going to reload this form, as sometimes it can take just a moment. And there it is. Now we see that Pulse users are starting to populate here on this tab. And so these are users that, again, meet this US users audience that we have selected. So you'll see a list form view of all of those different Pulse users that are targeted so far. And one thing that I'm going to do just to see if Alva is in that group for US users, perfect, she is. I'm going to go ahead and use her later when we go back to impersonate an employee to look at that perspective again to see the pulse survey that we just created. So now what I want to do, I've shown you the process of creating a group pulse survey and kind of the different options and configurations there. Now what would happen is for any of those users that are now here in this pulse users list view, they would start to receive a notification to let them know that a new pulse survey is available to them, because again, we have this send notifications checkbox selected. So now what I wanted to show you is I'm actually going to go into our email logs, so system logs and then emails. And here is actually a preview of what that notification looks like. So we can see a lot of different recipients here are receiving this survey invitation for that new survey that we just created on their resources around goals. So I am going to go ahead and click into this email, and I am going to show you a preview of what that looks like. So here it is. This is actually what we viewed earlier when we were in the PowerPoint. Just wanted to pull it up live during this portion of our session. So you can see, of course, that it's letting this user know that there is a new survey open and the organization would like to hear from her. And so it also specifies the response deadline. So it has all of the important information, and it also has a button that users can go ahead and click to go ahead and access that survey. The one thing I'll call out is, of course, you'll notice the ServiceNow branding. As with other notifications within our platform, if you have a use case or need to tweak this notification, you can absolutely do that. And so now what I want to show you is just where to find that notification. So I'm going to go into our system email notifications here. And if I search Pulse, there it is. So this is the group Pulse survey invite. So this is the kind of root or the source of what we just looked at for that specific user in the email log. So I'm going to go ahead and click into this. And if we click into this what it will contain tab, this is essentially that HTML editor for that email that we just saw. So you can see all of the different elements that are included, such as pulling in that user's first name and the due date. So again, this is where you would potentially want to navigate if you have a need to tweak this notification for your organization. So now we've gone through the process of creating that theme with the group pulse type. We've created that, triggered that, looked at the notifications that are sending. Now what we're going to do is we're going to look at an example to check out what that employee lifecycle type looks like. And before I do that, I will pause and I will again check with Padmaja and Lena to see if any of the Q&As that have come in would be worth kind of pausing here and talking through right now.
Alison, nothing at this point. We're able to answer a lot of the questions. Why don't you keep going and we'll skim through all and let you know if you want to highlight anything.
Yeah, just something
Sound
from my side. Alison, I see a question right now, and I think it would be worth addressing this at this point. So the question is, I'm doing this alongside a few and created the survey with the audience. I executed the job and validated the audience had users in it, but the recipient list is still blank. Did I miss something? So I just want to clarify here. Um, as the survey creator, you have the option to use either audience or recipient lists or both for associating a group of audience with a pulse survey. So if you have associated an audience, once the pulse survey is published and the instances are created, what you need to check is for the pulse users related list to be appearing on the pulse survey. If you have chosen a recipients list and not an audience, the same thing would happen. Your pulse users would be created based on the recipient list. Now, if you were to associate both, then a union of both those users within audience as well as recipient lists is considered for creating instances of the pulse survey. And again, you'll have to go to the pulse users related list to check that all users have instances.
Great, good question, and thank you for raising that one, Padmaja, and talking about it live.
Right, and I think again, and if the pulse users aren't showing still, what did I maybe do wrong? Yeah, so if you have gone through the steps of creating the group pulse survey and associating audience and then creating the job, I mean executing the job, I would say that it should be creating the pulse users for you. But I'll circle back on this real quick and answer this question in the chat if probably there could be something else that was missed.
Okay, yeah, and one other thing to check. So I can't remember if this person, if they are using an audience or if they selected a recipient list. If you're using an audience, it might also be worth it to just check out your audience record. And what you can do is see which users meet that criteria that's defined for the audience. So what you'll want to do is make sure that there are actually users that are meeting your criteria for the audience that was selected. So that's one route, but good questions. Okay, so now what I want to do is move forward and talk a little bit more about the employee lifecycle pulse type. So I am going to go back to listening posts in the left navigation. And I've done a little bit of pre-work to make this a little bit faster. So I've pre-configured some things, but I'll still talk through exactly what I have created and why. So within our Pulse themes list, I have created this new hire onboarding Pulse theme. So I'm going to go ahead and open that. And you'll notice that this is under that employee lifecycle Pulse type. And I have created a Pulse survey that is associated with this theme. So this survey that I've created is meant to kind of be a part of the new hire onboarding lifecycle event. And I have created a Pulse survey that I want to trigger as part of an activity set that triggers on an employee's job start date. So let me just click into that survey to show you how I have configured this survey. It's pretty similar to the other survey that we created around the group Pulse type. So as you can see, I have created two different questions here. So one is around how would you rate your first day? And the other one is, how would you rate the equipment and resources that were given to you on day one? So you can actually see that we already have 11 Pulse users that are, seeing that they have maybe a survey that's ready to take or either that's been completed. And what we'll do is I'll show you how we can actually trigger this to an additional user. We'll go ahead and trigger this directly to Alva since she is the employee that we have been using. So now that I've shown you the Pulse theme and the Pulse survey, again, this is very directly tied to a lifecycle event. So now let me pull that lifecycle event up and show you how that was configured. So I'm going to go in here and select this new hire onboarding lifecycle event that, again, I already had configured in this instance. And I am going to change my scope so we can see this. And now I'm going to look at our activity sets for this lifecycle event. So when we click in here, of course, this is a pretty big lifecycle event around onboarding. So there are a lot of different activity sets and activities that are happening. Where we specifically want to look is this day one activity set. So you can see here that I have actually created this Pulse day one check-in. So I'm going to go ahead and open that to show you exactly how I have configured that. So as you see, when I open this activity that I created, I have selected an activity type of Pulse survey. And then I'm actually able to select that Pulse survey that I showed just a minute ago, so that day one check-in. And the great thing about this is I'm also able to specifically select that user that I would like to have a Pulse survey instance created for. So in this scenario, I have selected that as the subject person. So essentially that is kind of the audience or the person that would receive this Pulse survey when everything kind of lines up in this activity set and activity triggers. So now that I've shown that, let me show you how I would actually be able to trigger that for Alva. So let me pull up her HR profile and show you something. So let me find Alva, click in here. And as you can see, I have already populated her job start date as today. So again, if you remember just a moment ago when we were looking at that activity set, the trigger for that was job start date is today. So because job start date for Alva is today, now what I can do is I can actually go in and create a case for Alva. Let's say that Hillary is Alva's manager. I'm going to open this case for her. I'm going to change the subject person to Alva. And of course, this is, a case that would be opened much earlier than an employee's, job start date typically, but just for the purposes of this example, we are opening it right now. So I'm going to find that new hire onboarding service that we looked at. And I'm going to go ahead and create this case. So now this case is in a draft state, and I am going to hit ready for work to change this state to ready, because that will actually start triggering things and we'll be able to see Alva posted as a Pulse user. All right, so now that that is in the ready state, I am going to go back to my Pulse surveys. And I am going to open up my new hire, or excuse me, my check-in survey that I created that's associated with the new hire onboarding Pulse theme. Let's just change my scope back to listening posts here. And now when we click into Pulse users, you remember we looked at this earlier and Alva was not there, but now she is. So now a survey instance for this Pulse survey has been generated to her, and it's in a state of ready to take. So now what I'll do is let's show this from Alva's perspective. So I am going to impersonate her. And now I'm going to go back out to the Employee Service Center. So we are on the Employee Service Center. We're impersonating Alva. And so as expected, here within this same listening post my survey widget that we saw earlier, she actually can see that she has 2 surveys assigned to her. So earlier she had the Pulse survey around collaborating with her team. Now she can see that she has 2 surveys. So we used this widget earlier. What I'll show next is how she can click in here to view both of those surveys that are assigned to her. So this is that list view widget that we talked about a little bit earlier on the PowerPoint slide. So this is exactly how it surfaces to Alva. She can see a list view of the 2 Pulse surveys that are assigned to her, since again, she has multiple. And let's go ahead and click into this day 1 check-in survey. So as you can see, this looks a little bit different again than the widget on the Employee Service Center homepage, because Alva can see both of these questions at once. So I'm going to go ahead and give this a 4, and then give this one a 5. And then if needed, Alva could go ahead and specify any additional details or comments that she wanted to add, because that's how we configured this Pulse survey and the questions to appear. So I am going to go ahead and submit this. And then you can see from this view that Alva again does get kind of a confirmation that her survey is complete. And because she has another survey that's assigned to her, she is prompted to take this other survey that we also built, so the group pulse type, to go ahead and take that. So if we click into that button, we're again taken to this same view where she can go ahead and complete this second pulse survey that was assigned to her. Great. Okay, so now I am going to change perspectives again. I am going to stop impersonating Alva. And I'm going to go back to being the system admin. And now what I want to show you is how we can actually create a pulse response sharing rule to actually share the results that we're getting back in our pulse surveys with different stakeholders. So if we go into our pulse themes, go there. And now I am going to open up the goal setting pulse theme that we created a little bit earlier. And I'm going to go back into this response sharing rules related list. So if I go here and go ahead and click new, I am presented with this response sharing rule form. So again, just to recap the use case here, we have triggered this pulse survey, and it's very likely that we have business stakeholders who would love to see the results to help drive, again, those continual improvements to the experience or the service or the program that they are providing to employees. So I'm going to create this rule to share the results of this pulse theme with a certain group of select users. So let's say that we actually want to share this with our HR benefits team. We specify the name, we're able to specify a description if we would like. And the next step is for us to actually potentially specify a demographic condition. So let's say we actually only wanted HR benefits to see responses that fit a certain demographic condition, like country is, the US or Brazil or Germany. We could go ahead and do that if we'd like to filter what they're able to see. But if this is left blank, they would be able to see all of the responses that fall under our pulse theme. Then we're able to select into user criteria. And if I go ahead and click into here, one thing to call out is the two things that are available to us within HR criteria in the context of creating a response sharing rule would be the users field and the groups field. So those are the two options that are at play here. And I am going to go ahead and select, I know we already have an HR benefits group, so I'm going to select that here and submit that. And go ahead and save that and submit the response sharing rule. Now, what would happen for the users who meet that user criteria condition of that group that I selected? They would actually receive a system notification to let them know that that has been shared with them. For the sake of time, I won't pull up that email notification, but just wanted to call out that it is something that would generate. And now let's go ahead and look at that Pulse dashboard. So we talked about this a little bit earlier in PowerPoint, but I really want to spend some time here during this portion because this, again, is one of the very powerful aspects of listening posts because this is what is going to help you and your organization glean insights from those quick in-moment pulse surveys that you are sending out. So the great thing about this dashboard is that there are a lot of different ways to, again, slice and dice data. So first, you can go ahead and select a pulse theme that you would like to view. So I'm going to select this employee wellness theme that we configured before this call. And then you'll see what's happening is data is populating on this dashboard. So what I'm seeing is all of the surveys that fall under this employee wellness theme. Now, if I wanted to, I could also go ahead and drill specifically into one of these two surveys to see the results separately for those. I'm going to go ahead and just keep this selected at the overall theme level. We could also select a start date and an end date for viewing the responses under those conditions. And then if we look over to the right, we're also able to see some aggregate information. So we can see the overall score that's being received back as part of this theme, the number of responses, the percentage of participation. And then if we start to look a little bit lower down in the dashboard, we can see that there are a couple of tabs here. So we have this overall summary tab, and what this is it's essentially the data broken down by different demographic information. So we can see the average score by department, country, and title here. And then what's really great is you can see that we have this availability to actually continue to filter and select specific departments, countries, or titles. Next, we have this trend history tab. So what this is it's showing kind of the trending results of responses received over time. So for our specific demo data, we had all of our responses submitted on one day. So this doesn't look that fun, but of course, with your instance and real data, this would be more visual and show that trend history. And then we have the response details tab. And this is probably, I would say, my personal favorite area of the dashboard. It's very visual. So what it shows is it shows the two surveys that are under this theme that we've selected. And it has some summary information. So it has when the dates that these surveys were available, the number of questions, some information around the overall response rate and the overall kind of ratings that were received back. And then if you go ahead and click into see details, we see an even more visual summary breakdown of those specific questions that are in this Pulse survey. So you can see that we see the response rate per question, the star rating per question, and how that falls from a percentage perspective. And then we can even view the comments that were received back. So this is, of course, if you have enabled that via the configuration of your Pulse survey question. So if we go ahead and click into here, we can see that we see the comments that were submitted. And there are different ways to sort this, of course, but this is really meaningful, again, for all of those stakeholders to check out the feedback that was submitted and received back from those in-moment activities where this is being measured. So now what I want to do is I am going to flip back over to our PowerPoint, and now I want to pivot to our questions. So I know Padmaja and Lena have probably been busy answering the Q&As in the Zoom chat. I'm going to go ahead and share my PowerPoint deck again because we have a couple of frequently asked questions that we wanted to review, but I'll also open it back up just again to check to see if we have any questions that we should be answering live here. Okay, and what I'll do is I will walk the.
Hey, it's real quick. It's is the audience feature the same as used in the targeted communications from CSM? Do they share the audience or are they separate?
Sure. So I think you kind of glitched out. The question was whether the audience feature is actually the same as what's used for the customer service management application.
Yep, that's correct. Sorry.
Yeah, so Padmaja or Lena, feel free to jump in. I think the answer here is that for the CSM application, that audience will be a bit different. We do have the concept of audience within HR service delivery for other aspects of that product. So if you're familiar with audience for, again, content delivery or automation, that is for certain the same.
That is correct, Alison. We use the audience feature from our content automation, content delivery product. I mean, basically that plugin. It's not similar to the CSM audience.
Great, thank you. Now, a couple of other just frequently asked questions. I don't know if they've already been answered in the Q&A, but wanted to recap since these are things that typically come up quite a bit. So one question is whether Pulse surveys are anonymous. So the thing to understand here is that those reports that we were just looking at on the Pulse dashboard, as you notice, they really just contain that aggregate data and they don't expose any information that identifies any of the survey respondents. So that kind of confidentiality is kept for those users who have responded to the Pulse surveys. And one thing to call out is that that raw data is accessible to the listening post admin, the user with that role, just in case they need to export that data. And then the other one that we wanted to review with the group is whether Pulse surveys can be created in a production environment. And the answer here is that yes, you can build Pulse surveys in a production environment if you have an applicable role. All right, so I will check back in. It looks like potentially the Q&A has been busy, but I'll just check again. Padmaja, Lena, anything else that we should talk about as a group live?
I think all questions were answered, and I've taken one point, which is I think regarding the alumni users, and I'm confirming that we can create pulse surveys for alumni users as well. I see a hand raise in the audience. I'm not sure if that's for a question or what that is for, but we don't have any active questions in Q&A as of now.
Sure. Okay. So whoever raised your hand, feel free if you have a question to go ahead and type that into the Q&A. If you have a specific question, we can go ahead and address that. And while we're doing that, I will jump forward and we can circle back to see if we have gotten a Q&A question. I wanted to put out a call to action to the group. So if you are interested in either adopting listening posts or even becoming a design partner, we would love to hear from you. So please either reach out to your account team or comment on our community event page, and we would love to hear from you and work with you. And the other thing that I would also say about our community event page is, if you think of a question later, feel free to come back to the event page and post that question there. Or even if you are one of those users who is not on live but will watch the playback, feel free to add questions on that event page. All right, did we end up getting a question that we should talk about as a group in the chat? I'll just check one last time.
I think we're all caught up, Allison. Maybe you just, we did get some questions again on, the fact that this can be accessed via the store, and how it can be accessed, if it's available for all HR customers. So maybe you can just do a recap on that, as well as another question was around how can partners access this via their demo instances. So that could be a point to cover as well.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So I'm going to go back to some of my earlier slides just so we have a visual here. I'm going to go back to sharing this one. So just wanted to recap some of the information on availability and licensing. So again, listening posts are included with our HR Service Delivery Enterprise package. This application is compatible with Orlando and beyond. And then this was again released in January on the ServiceNow Store. And so if we go to the next slide, this has a little bit more information on the ServiceNow Store. So again, on the right, this is the URL for where you would actually access that. And then you can see it might be kind of small, but it says this is automatically entitled on sub-prod instances and all ServiceNow instances and developer instances. So hopefully that helps to answer the question in terms of licensing and how you could potentially get this if you have a developer instance, if you are a partner.
Allison, there's a question that someone is asking right now. Maybe you can cover it as you're on this topic. What is the difference between store and plugins?
Good question. So again, the store is a new mechanism for us to release plugins essentially to customers out of band of those large family releases. So typically those family releases come out about twice per year, once in Q1 and Q3. But the store allows us to innovate faster and push those applications out. And so they're not always dependent on the most recent family release. So Listening Post is a good example of this. So like we talked about, this is actually back compatible with Orlando, Paris, and now obviously Quebec. And so that is hopefully an answer to kind of describe the difference there. Great. Okay. Anything else that's coming in through the chat?
Nothing else at this point, Allison.
Great. Okay. Well, I think we are just about right at time. So just wanted to thank everyone again for joining live. And again, remind you that we did record today's session. So the video will be available for playback on the event page. And thank you again to everyone who is on.